It was one of those long Fridays in the office when everyone secretly watched the clock more than their computer screens. The air smelled like stale coffee and leftover pizza from the lunch meeting. People were tired, chatting quietly, waiting for the weekend to begin. The company had decided to end the week with something they called a casual mixer. It was basically a fancy name for a small office party with snacks, music, and a few awkward jokes from the boss. Everyone gathered in the lounge area, pretending to relax while still being careful not to say anything too risky in front of their supervisors. The lounge looked cozy but expensive. There were gray sofas, a small stage, and in the corner stood an old black piano. Hardly anyone had ever touched it. It was more of a decoration than an instrument, a reminder of the company's early days when the founder liked to say he valued creativity. That founder was now the boss, Ethan Marks. Tall, charming, and always dressed sharply. He had a way of walking into a room that made people either admire him or fear him. Most of the employees had learned to laugh at his jokes even when they weren't funny. He didn't mean to be cruel, but his teasing often went a little too far. That evening he stood near the center of the room, holding a glass of sparkling water and joking with his management team. They laughed loudly as if everything he said was hilarious. Across the room near the snack table stood Clara James. She was the newest intern, quiet, polite, and always focused on her work. She had joined the company only 3 weeks earlier. Most people didn't know much about her except that she worked hard and spoke softly. She always carried a small notebook, writing down everything during meetings. Clara had never been the type to draw attention. Her clothes were plain, her hair usually tied back, and her voice gentle enough that people sometimes forgot she was in the room. But she was observant. She noticed things others didn't: who was kind, who was pretending, who really listened when someone spoke. As the evening went on, Ethan decided the room needed a little fun. He looked around for someone new to tease, someone who wouldn't talk back. His eyes landed on Clara, who was standing quietly with a plate of chips, smiling faintly at the conversation happening nearby. He grinned and raised his voice. "Hey, Clara, you look like you're enjoying the snacks more than the party." People turned to look at her. Clara smiled awkwardly. "Just trying to stay awake, sir," she said softly. A few people chuckled. Ethan walked toward her with the confidence of someone who liked being the center of attention. "You know," he said, glancing at the piano in the corner, "we've had that thing here for years and not once has anyone played it." He turned back to Clara, his eyes gleaming with mischief. "Tell you what, if you can play something nice on that piano, I'll make you the CEO." The room erupted in laughter. It was clearly a joke, but the tone had a sharp edge. Clara's face flushed pink. She didn't know what to say. Everyone was staring at her, waiting for her reaction. She forced a small laugh. "I don't think I'm qualified for that, sir." Ethan leaned back slightly, still grinning. "Come on, it's just for fun. A few notes, maybe? Show us your hidden talent." More laughter. A few coworkers whispered among themselves. Some felt uncomfortable, but no one said anything. Clara looked at the piano. Her heart began to race. She hadn't touched one in years. That old black piano brought back a wave of memories she had spent years trying to lock away. Late nights practicing, her father sitting beside her, his gentle voice encouraging her when her hands trembled. But that was before everything changed, before her father got sick, before she had to sell their family piano to pay hospital bills, before she promised her mother she'd choose a real career that could keep them stable. She had buried that part of her life, convincing herself it didn't matter anymore. Music was something she used to love, but now it felt like a dream she wasn't allowed to chase. Ethan clapped his hands once. "Come on, everyone's waiting." "Don't be shy." The people around him laughed again, though some looked uneasy. One woman murmured quietly, "Maybe she doesn't play." But her voice was drowned by the noise. Clara smiled politely, even though her stomach was twisting. "I really don't think," but Ethan interrupted. "Afraid you'll miss a few notes? That's fine, we'll forgive you. Consider it your audition for CEO." The crowd laughed again. Even a few of Clara's fellow interns giggled nervously, unsure whether to defend her or stay quiet. For a moment, Clara felt like she was back in high school, standing on stage during a recital, her fingers frozen, everyone staring, waiting. She could almost hear her father's voice again. "Don't play for them, play for yourself." Something inside her stirred. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was the quiet strength she'd learned from years of pretending not to be hurt by people's words. She took a deep breath, set her plate down on the table, and looked directly at Ethan. "All right," she said calmly. "If that's what you want." The laughter stopped. The room fell silent. Ethan blinked, surprised. He hadn't expected her to actually agree. "You're serious?" he asked. Clara nodded. "Yes, sir." She walked toward the piano slowly, every step echoing in the quiet room. The sound of her heels on the wooden floor seemed louder than anything else. Some people exchanged curious glances. A few whispered that she might embarrass herself. Ethan folded his arms, leaning against a chair. "All right then, let's see what you've got." Clara reached the piano. The black surface was slightly dusty. She brushed her fingers over it, feeling the cool texture of the wood. Her hands trembled for a moment, not from fear of failure, but from emotion. It had been so long. She lifted the piano lid, revealing the keys beneath. The familiar sight almost brought tears to her eyes. She sat down on the small bench, closed her eyes, and took a deep breath. The room was completely still now. Even the usual background noise, the faint buzz of computers, the hum of the air conditioner, seemed to fade away. Clara placed her fingers on the keys just lightly enough to feel their smooth surface. Memories came flooding back. Her father's smile, the old wooden piano in their living room, the way he used to tap his foot when she got the rhythm right. For a second, she almost backed away. But then she remembered how he used to say, "Courage doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you play anyway." She pressed a single key. The soft note filled the air, clear and pure. It echoed through the lounge like a whisper of something long forgotten. Ethan straightened slightly, his grin fading. People around him leaned forward, curious. Clara pressed another key, then another. Slowly, the notes began to form a melody, a gentle, flowing tune that felt both sad and hopeful at once. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She was simply remembering. Her hands grew steadier with each note. Her back straightened. The room was silent, completely mesmerized. Ethan's expression softened. He hadn't expected this. There was something about the way she played, the emotion, the sincerity, that cut through the noise and pride that usually filled the office. The tune lingered, fragile yet powerful, as if the piano itself had been waiting years for someone to wake it up again. When she stopped, the silence that followed was deafening. No one clapped, no one spoke. It was the kind of silence that only comes after something real. Clara stood up slowly and looked at Ethan. "Was that enough for the CEO position?" she asked softly with a small smile. For a moment, he didn't know what to say. The teasing had vanished from his voice when he finally replied, I think we might need to renegotiate your job title." A few people laughed gently, not the cruel kind of laughter from before, but warm and genuine. Someone started clapping. Soon the whole room joined in. Clara smiled, a real smile this time. She didn't care about the applause or the challenge anymore. For the first time in years, she felt like herself again. As the sound of clapping filled the air, Ethan turned away for a moment, hiding a look that was half pride, half shame. He had tried to make her a joke, but instead, she had reminded everyone what grace and quiet strength really looked like. And though she didn't know it yet, that single moment, the moment she chose to play, would change everything that came after. The applause slowly faded, but Clara didn't immediately move. She sat there on the piano bench, letting the sound of her own playing settle in her mind. The room had changed. Something in the energy shifted. It was no longer just an office lounge. It felt alive, almost magical. People were staring, not with judgment or curiosity, but with awe. She could feel the eyes on her, but she didn't look up. Instead, she let herself remember. Each note, each soft pause carried fragments of her past. Music had always been a part of her, even when she had tried to hide it. She had stopped playing years ago, pushed away by responsibility and the belief that practical work mattered more than art. After a moment, she rose and closed the piano lid gently. The room erupted in applause again, louder this time. Colleagues whispered to each other, asking if she had trained in music before coming here. Ethan, standing a few feet away, looked stunned. For someone who thrived on control and humor, he had never expected that a shy intern could command a room without saying a single word. "Clara," Ethan started, but his voice sounded softer, uncertain. He ran a hand through his hair and tried to hide the surprise in his eyes. How did you? His words trailed off. Clara shrugged slightly, a shy smile crossing her face. "I used to play when I was younger," she said simply. No one pressed for more. Her tone was quiet, but it carried a weight of honesty that no boastful claim could ever match. The employees slowly started returning to their casual conversations, but the energy lingered. People who had been glued to their phones were now talking in low voices about the piano performance. It wasn't just about skill. It was about courage, about stepping into the spotlight despite fear, about reclaiming something that was deeply personal. Clara walked back to the snack table, her heart still racing. She picked up a plate, pretending to examine the food while actually trying to calm down. Her hands were still slightly trembling. "Hey," a colleague said softly. "That was incredible." "I didn't know you could play like that." Clara smiled faintly, grateful for the kind words. "Thank you. It's been a long time." Meanwhile, Ethan stood in a corner, staring at the piano. He was a man used to commanding attention, used to making people feel small with a joke, used to being the center of every gathering. And yet, that night, for the first time in a long time, someone had taken the room from him. Not through loudness or charm, but through quiet strength. He remembered the moment vividly. The way she had sat down, closed her eyes and let the music flow naturally. There was something honest about it, something that reminded him of what it felt like to be truly moved. He couldn't recall ever experiencing that in a professional setting. After a few moments, he cleared his throat and approached her. Clara looked up, slightly wary, unsure what to expect. I have to say," he began, "I wasn't expecting that. You were amazing." His usual teasing tone was gone, replaced by something closer to sincerity. Clara nodded, unsure what to say. Compliments from Ethan often carried a hidden meaning, a reminder that nothing was ever free. "I mean it," he continued. "Not many people can do that. Not many people can command attention without saying a word." Clara's cheeks flushed slightly and she looked down at her plate. "Thank you," she murmured. Ethan hesitated, then asked, "Have you played in public before?" Clara shook her head. "Not really. Just small recitals when I was a kid. Nothing like this." For a moment, they stood in silence, the noise of the room fading around them. Ethan found himself curious about this quiet, strong intern who had managed to surprise everyone, including him. Meanwhile, other employees were starting to gather around, trying to catch snippets of conversation. Some whispered, "Did you see that? She's amazing." Others wondered if she had been hiding a secret talent. There was a buzz of energy that hadn't been there before, an excitement that made the room feel smaller and warmer. Later, Clara retreated to a quiet corner of the lounge to catch her breath. She felt a mixture of relief and emotion she couldn't quite place. It was strange to feel pride without arrogance, to feel powerful without speaking. She ran a hand over her hair, smiling faintly to herself. The memory of her father's encouragement came back again. He had always believed in her, even when circumstances made it impossible for her to continue. "Music speaks louder than words," he had said. She had forgotten how much that mattered, but now it felt alive again. Ethan, on the other hand, couldn't stop thinking about the event. He had always appreciated talent, but he had rarely seen it presented with such humility and grace. He found himself wondering what other surprises Clara might be hiding. There was something in her that went beyond skill, a quiet confidence that could not be faked. Over the next hour, the office mixer continued, but the mood had shifted. People were laughing and talking, but there was a sense of admiration lingering in the air. Clara's performance had changed the dynamic. She wasn't just the shy intern anymore. She had become someone people looked at differently, someone who had reminded them of the value of talent, courage, and authenticity. As the evening wound down, Ethan found himself alone for a moment, staring at the piano. He remembered how he had once joked about making her CEO if she played. The words now felt strangely inadequate. He realized that the real power she had displayed could never be measured by a title. Clara packed up her things and quietly left the lounge. She didn't linger for attention. She didn't need validation. The applause, the compliments, the surprised looks. It was all nice, but it wasn't why she had played. She had played because it was a part of her she had almost forgotten, and now she had reclaimed it. That night, as she walked to her car, Clara felt lighter than she had in years. The city lights glimmered on the wet streets, and she felt a strange sense of anticipation for the future. Something had shifted, not just in the office but inside her. She had remembered who she was, and that knowledge was powerful. Meanwhile, Ethan returned to his office, his mind restless. He couldn't stop replaying the performance in his head. He realized that he had underestimated Clara. He had seen her as timid, quiet, and easily overlooked. But in just a few minutes she had reminded him, and everyone else, that appearances could be deceiving. Strength and talent often lived where you least expected them. The following Monday, the office felt different. Clara noticed it immediately. People greeted her with small smiles and nods that carried a new respect. The casual whispers about her piano performance continued. Even some of the senior managers who had previously been dismissive began asking her for her opinion on projects. Clara didn't let it go to her head. She stayed focused, working quietly and efficiently, but she felt a new sense of confidence. She had discovered something about herself, and that discovery gave her an inner strength that nothing in the office could diminish. Ethan, too, was changing. He found himself observing her in meetings, noticing how she approached problems, how she listened to others, and how quietly effective she could be. He had always valued talent, but he realized that true talent often came with humility, courage, and the ability to inspire without words. Over the next few weeks, Clara's presence began to have a subtle but noticeable effect on the office. People became more considerate, more willing to listen, more willing to give credit where it was due. Her quiet strength seemed to ripple outward, changing the dynamics in ways no one could fully explain. Ethan found himself thinking about how he could challenge her further, not with jokes or dares, but with real opportunities. He wanted to see how far she could go, not because he wanted to test her, but because he genuinely believed she had potential beyond what anyone had realized. And Clara, quietly confident, continued to do her work with dedication and care. She didn't seek attention or praise. She simply focused on doing her best, knowing that she had already proven something important to herself, if not yet to the world. For the first time in a long while, both of them understood something essential. Talent was powerful, but courage was transformative. One small act of bravery could shift perceptions, inspire others, and change the course of events in ways no one could predict. That Friday night, when she had sat down at the piano and let her fingers move, Clara had done more than play music. She had reminded everyone, including herself, that courage, authenticity, and hidden talent could create moments that lingered far beyond the applause. And though no one in the office could have predicted it, that evening would become a story retold many times, not just because of the skill she displayed, but because of the quiet strength and bravery it revealed. For Clara, it was the beginning of a journey she hadn't yet fully imagined, one that promised growth, discovery, and the possibility of new dreams coming true. The weekend passed quietly, but Clara couldn't stop thinking about that night. The memory of her hands on the piano keys, the soft notes filling the room, and the way people had reacted stayed with her. It was strange to feel so alive after years of putting her own passions aside. For the first time in a long time, she felt like she was more than just an intern, more than just someone quietly blending into the background. Monday morning arrived, and the office was buzzing. People moved faster than usual, their conversations carrying an undercurrent of curiosity. Many had already shared stories about Clara's piano performance with colleagues who hadn't been at the mixer. It had become the talk of the office, a reminder that sometimes the quietest people had the strongest voices. Clara walked through the office with a small coffee cup in her hand, trying to ignore the whispers and glances that followed her. She had expected awkwardness, maybe even teasing from Ethan, but something had shifted. Instead of jokes, there were subtle nods of respect, small smiles, and a sense of curiosity. Her first meeting of the day was with her team. As she entered the conference room, she noticed the way people paused for a moment, then returned to their work with slightly lighter steps. Clara took a deep breath, reminding herself that this was still work, not a stage. She had responsibilities, deadlines, and tasks that had nothing to do with piano keys or applause. But the confidence she had gained over the weekend made a difference. She spoke up more clearly, suggested ideas she had previously hesitated to share, and even challenged small errors in the plan that others had overlooked. Her colleagues listened, not because she demanded attention, but because they now realized she was capable and intelligent. Meanwhile, Ethan watched from his office. He had been thinking all weekend about Clara's performance. He had seen her once briefly in the hallway on Friday after the mixer, and had tried to thank her personally, but she had already walked away. Her quiet strength fascinated him. He realized he had underestimated her. She wasn't just talented at the piano. She had something else: discipline, focus, and the ability to inspire people without trying. By midday, Ethan made a decision. He called Clara into his office. She felt a flutter of nervousness in her chest. She had learned to navigate his office carefully, knowing that his attention could be both intimidating and unpredictable. "Clara," he said, leaning back in his chair, "can I talk to you for a minute?" She nodded, stepping into the room. The office smelled faintly of leather and polished wood. Ethan gestured for her to sit. "I've been thinking about Friday night," he began. "Not the joke, not the dares, what you did with the piano. That was something else. I want to know more about you, and I want to see what you can do here. Not just at the piano, but at work." Clara blinked, unsure how to respond. Compliments from Ethan were rare, and they often came with an expectation. But this felt different. There was genuine curiosity in his voice, something she hadn't heard before. "I'm just doing my job," she said softly. "You're doing more than your job," he said. "You have skills and abilities that are untapped. I think you could handle more responsibility. You've got a perspective that others here don't. I want to see how far you can go if you're given the chance." Clara felt a mixture of excitement and hesitation. She had always been careful to stay in her lane, to work hard without drawing attention. But now an opportunity was opening before her, one she had never imagined. I'd like that," she said cautiously. "Good," Ethan replied. "I'll start by giving you a lead on a project that needs fresh ideas. Think of it as a test, but one where you can really show your skills." Clara nodded. She left his office with a strange sense of anticipation. For the first time, she felt like someone believed in her potential. Not just as an intern, but as a professional capable of contributing meaningfully. The days that followed were a mixture of challenge and discovery. Clara dove into her new project, researching, brainstorming, and presenting ideas that were thoughtful and innovative. She spent long hours at her desk, sometimes staying late after everyone had left, refining her proposals and ensuring that her work was thorough. Her colleagues began noticing the difference. Some approached her for advice, others asked for feedback, and a few even sought her opinion on decisions that were usually reserved for senior staff. She was no longer invisible. People were beginning to recognize her talent, and she was beginning to recognize her own. One afternoon, as she was reviewing a set of documents, Ethan appeared at her desk. "How's the project coming along?" he asked, leaning casually against the side of her cubicle. "Progressing well," she replied. "I've identified a few areas that could be improved, and I'm drafting proposals for each." "Good," he said, nodding. "I want you to present your ideas to the team tomorrow. Don't worry about making it perfect. I want to see your thinking, your process." Clara's heart raced. Presenting in front of the team was intimidating, but she remembered the piano. The courage she had felt sitting at the keys reminded her that she could handle more than she thought. "I'll be ready," she said confidently. The next day, Clara stood in the conference room, her laptop open and her notes organized. She took a deep breath and began presenting her ideas. At first, there were a few skeptical glances, subtle doubts in the eyes of some colleagues. But as she explained her thoughts clearly and logically, those doubts began to fade. People leaned forward, asked questions, and engaged with her proposals. By the end of the presentation, the team was impressed. Several managers nodded approvingly, and a few even complimented her on the depth of her analysis and creativity. Clara felt a surge of pride, but she kept it contained, focusing instead on the work ahead. Ethan watched quietly from the back of the room. He had expected competence, but he had not expected the way she could communicate ideas and win people over with calm confidence. He realized that Friday night had been just the beginning. Clara's potential extended far beyond the piano. After the meeting, one of her colleagues approached her. "That was really good," he said. "I didn't know you had that in you." Clara smiled politely. "Thank you. I'm just trying to do my best." But inside she felt a growing sense of self-assurance. She had faced fear before, played for an audience, and now she was facing new challenges in the workplace. Each success, no matter how small, added to her confidence. As the week progressed, Clara began to notice subtle changes in herself. She was speaking up more in meetings, volunteering for tasks she might have avoided before, and even offering suggestions to colleagues who had once seemed intimidating. Her presence was becoming more noticeable, not through loudness or aggression, but through quiet competence and consistent effort. Ethan continued to observe her, intrigued by the combination of talent, humility, and determination. He started assigning her tasks that were progressively more complex, testing her ability to handle responsibility. Clara never complained, even when the workload was heavy. She approached each challenge with focus and care, finding satisfaction in solving problems and improving processes. One evening, as the office emptied, Clara stayed behind to finalize a report. The lounge was quiet except for the faint hum of the air conditioner. She glanced at the piano in the corner, remembering the first notes she had played. A smile crossed her face. Music had reminded her of courage, and now that same courage was guiding her through her work. Ethan walked by and paused. "Burning the midnight oil again?" he asked. Clara looked up, a little startled. "Just finishing some things," she replied. "I've been watching your progress," he said. "You're doing more than I expected. Keep it up." Clara nodded, appreciating the acknowledgement. She didn't need praise, but it felt good to know that her efforts were recognized. Over the next few weeks, the dynamic in the office began to shift. Colleagues who had once overlooked her now sought her opinion. Managers began to trust her judgment. Even Ethan found himself relying on her input more frequently. Clara's confidence continued to grow, fueled by the quiet validation of her skills and the realization that she could make a real impact. One afternoon, she was called into a meeting with Ethan and a few senior managers. The conversation started as a routine discussion about a project, but soon Ethan turned to her. "Clara," he said, "I want you to take the lead on this initiative. I think your approach will bring something fresh to the table. Are you willing?" Clara felt a surge of excitement and responsibility. This was a significant step, a recognition of her abilities, not just her potential. She nodded firmly. "Yes, I'll do my best." As she left the meeting, she realized how far she had come in such a short time. The timid intern who had walked quietly through the office weeks ago was now someone trusted to lead, to make decisions, and to inspire others by example. She thought back to that first night at the piano. It had been a moment of courage, a small act that had changed her path. She understood now that courage wasn't about grand gestures, it was about facing fear, stepping forward and trusting oneself. And with that understanding, Clara was ready to embrace whatever challenges lay ahead, confident in her abilities and determined to continue growing, one step at a time. Clara's new responsibility came with pressure she hadn't experienced before. Leading a project was not like presenting at a meeting or answering a manager's question. It meant taking ownership, making decisions that affected others, and showing results. She felt the weight of expectation, but there was also a strange excitement in it, a feeling that she had been preparing for this moment all her life, even if she hadn't realized it. The project was ambitious. It involved coordinating multiple teams, reviewing complex data, and presenting a creative solution that could improve the company's workflow. Clara spent hours studying reports, analyzing patterns, and brainstorming ideas. Her desk became a flurry of notes, charts, and colored markers as she worked to organize her thoughts. Her colleagues noticed her focus. Some admired her dedication, while others were quietly impressed at the clarity and precision of her work. Clara didn't seek attention, but people began to watch her quietly, curious to see how she would handle the challenge. One morning, as she was reviewing a draft of her presentation, Ethan walked by. "Everything going okay?" he asked, his tone casual but his eyes observing closely. Clara looked up, a little startled. "Yes, I think I've got most of it organized. I just need to finalize a few points." He nodded, leaning on the doorframe. "I don't doubt it. I just want to see what you come up with." "The team is counting on you." Clara swallowed her nervousness. The weight of responsibility pressed on her, but she remembered the piano. She remembered how she had faced fear and uncertainty before, and how the act of playing had given her a sense of control and purpose. Now she had to channel that same courage into her work. The day of the big presentation arrived. Clara walked into the conference room with her laptop, notes, and a carefully prepared outline. The room was filled with senior managers, project leads, and a few curious colleagues who had heard whispers of her performance from the previous week. Ethan was there, sitting at the head of the table, watching with an unreadable expression. Clara's stomach twisted with nerves, but she straightened her back and took a deep breath. "Good morning, everyone," she began, her voice steady despite the tension she felt inside. "I'd like to present a proposal that could help improve our workflow and increase efficiency across departments." As she spoke, she noticed a few skeptical looks. Some people doubted that a young intern could offer anything substantial. Clara didn't let it shake her. She focused on her material, letting the hours of preparation and her own knowledge guide her words. Her fingers moved quickly over the laptop, advancing slides that illustrated her points clearly. She explained each section with care, showing not just what she had found, but why it mattered. She answered questions confidently, sometimes pausing to think, sometimes redirecting discussions when necessary. The room started to shift. Skeptical glances were replaced by nods of understanding. People leaned forward, listening more intently. Clara's clarity and calm approach began to win them over. She could feel the room's energy change. It was no longer doubt or hesitation, but engagement and interest. Ethan watched silently from the back. He had expected competence, but he hadn't expected the way she could command attention without raising her voice or demanding respect. It was different from any other presentation he had seen in the office. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She was simply sharing ideas, and the authenticity made it compelling. Halfway through, a senior manager asked a difficult question. Clara paused, considering her answer carefully. She could feel the weight of expectation, but she didn't let it overwhelm her. She explained her reasoning clearly, offering a solution that was both practical and innovative. The manager leaned back, impressed. "I hadn't considered it that way. That's a good approach," he said. Clara smiled politely. "Thank you. I think collaboration is key, and this method allows teams to work together more effectively." By the time she finished, the room was buzzing with conversation. People were discussing her ideas, offering suggestions, and even debating ways to implement her proposals. Clara had expected feedback, but the intensity and positivity surprised her. She had not only presented her ideas, she had sparked discussion, creativity, and collaboration. Ethan finally spoke, breaking the conversation. "Clara, that was excellent," he said, his usual teasing tone replaced by genuine admiration. "You handled questions, explained your ideas clearly, and brought everyone together. This is exactly the kind of leadership we need." Clara felt a flush of relief and pride. She had been nervous, but her preparation, focus, and confidence had carried her through. She realized that leadership wasn't about being loud or dominant. It was about clarity, patience, and understanding the needs of others. After the meeting, a few colleagues approached her, praising her performance. "That was impressive," one said. "I didn't know you could think so strategically." Clara nodded, feeling a quiet satisfaction. She didn't boast, but the recognition fueled her confidence. She had faced fear before at the piano, and now she was facing fear in the professional world and succeeding. The following weeks were a whirlwind. Clara's project required coordination across multiple departments, careful planning, and constant communication. She spent long hours ensuring every detail was covered, often staying late to troubleshoot issues or clarify instructions. It was exhausting, but she felt a sense of purpose she hadn't experienced before. Ethan continued to observe her. He started giving her more responsibilities, gradually testing her ability to handle pressure. Clara never faltered. She approached each challenge with calm determination, carefully analyzing problems, considering multiple solutions, and implementing the best approach. One afternoon, during a particularly stressful moment, a major issue arose. A critical part of the project had not gone as planned, and some team members were frustrated. Clara stepped in calmly, listening to their concerns without judgment. She asked questions, clarified misunderstandings, and proposed a solution that addressed the issue efficiently. By the end of the day, the tension had eased. The team felt reassured, and the project was back on track. Clara had demonstrated not only competence but also emotional intelligence, a rare quality that earned her respect from colleagues and managers alike. Ethan, watching from a distance, was impressed. He realized that Clara's strength wasn't just in her technical skills, but in her ability to remain composed under pressure, inspire confidence in others, and lead with empathy. These were qualities he had rarely seen combined so effectively in someone so young. The project continued to progress successfully. Clara's leadership style became a model for others, showing that quiet confidence, careful preparation, and genuine care for others could achieve remarkable results. Her colleagues began to look to her for guidance not because she demanded it, but because they trusted her judgment and respected her approach. One evening, as Clara stayed late to finalize a report, she found herself reflecting on how much had changed. The timid intern who had walked into the office weeks ago was now someone who commanded respect, inspired confidence, and led a significant project. The piano had been a turning point, not just in the office but in her own understanding of herself. Ethan stopped by her desk. "You've done well," he said simply. "I've been thinking. We need more people like you around here." Clara looked up, surprised. "Thank you," she said softly. "No, really," he continued. "You've shown that leadership isn't just about titles or loud voices. It's about patience, intelligence, and courage. Keep this up and I think you'll go far." Clara nodded, feeling a sense of quiet pride. She realized that courage was not a one-time act. It was a habit, a way of approaching life, work, and challenges. She had faced fear before, first at the piano, and now in her professional life. Each act of courage built on the last, shaping her into someone capable of handling more than she had imagined. The following week, Clara received positive feedback from senior management. Her project had exceeded expectations, and several departments had implemented her recommendations. The success was tangible, but more importantly, Clara had proven to herself that she could rise to challenges, inspire confidence in others, and lead with integrity. Ethan called her into his office once again. "I want to give you more responsibility," he said. "You've proven yourself capable, and I think it's time for you to take on a larger role. Are you ready?" Clara smiled faintly, feeling the weight of the moment. She had grown through every challenge, learned from every mistake, and embraced her own courage. "Yes," she said firmly. "I'm ready." Ethan nodded, impressed by her composure. "Good. I think you'll surprise us all." As Clara left his office, she felt a mix of excitement and anticipation. The journey was far from over, but she understood something crucial. Courage, preparation, and authenticity could open doors she had never imagined. And with that understanding, she was ready to face whatever came next, confident in herself and her abilities. The piano had started it all, but now Clara's journey was moving forward in a new direction. The quiet intern who had once hidden in the background was no longer invisible. She had found her voice, her strength, and her purpose, and everyone around her was beginning to see it too. Weeks passed, and Clara's confidence grew steadily. But with growth came challenges she hadn't anticipated. Her latest assignment was unlike anything she had handled before. It involved coordinating a high-stakes presentation with multiple departments, each with its own priorities, egos, and deadlines. The stakes were higher than anything she had faced in the office so far, and she could feel the tension in the air before the meeting even began. She arrived early that morning, carrying her laptop and a stack of carefully prepared notes. The conference room was quiet except for the hum of the air conditioning and the faint tapping of fingers on keyboards. Some of the senior managers had already arrived, reviewing their own materials while a few team members quietly rehearsed their parts. Clara set up her laptop and tested the projector, her hands steady but her mind racing. Ethan entered shortly after, his presence filling the room with a quiet authority. He gave Clara a nod, acknowledging her early preparation. "Are you ready for this?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. Clara took a deep breath. "I am," she said calmly, though a small flicker of nerves ran through her chest. She reminded herself of the piano, of how she had faced fear, uncertainty, and judgment in front of an audience, and how she had turned that fear into action. The courage she had discovered then would guide her now. The meeting began with a review of the project's objectives. Clara listened carefully, taking notes, observing how different departments interacted and noting the tensions that might arise. When it was her turn to speak, she stood up and walked to the front of the room, her laptop in hand. "Good morning, everyone," she said. "I've been analyzing the workflow and the current challenges we face. I'd like to present a proposal that addresses these issues and suggests a more efficient process for collaboration between departments." She advanced her slides, showing clear charts, step-by-step plans, and potential outcomes. Her explanations were precise, her voice steady, and her body language confident. She anticipated questions before they were asked and provided answers with clarity and logic. The room shifted. Skepticism lingered in the air at first, but as Clara continued, her calm and structured approach began to win people over. Managers leaned forward, employees exchanged approving glances, and the energy in the room transformed from doubt to engagement. Then came the unexpected. A senior executive, known for being blunt and critical, challenged one of Clara's key suggestions. "This idea could slow down the workflow in the long run," he said. "Have you considered how it might affect our current deadlines?" Clara paused, considering her response carefully. She didn't flinch or become defensive. Instead, she walked through her reasoning methodically, showing data she had gathered, examples from other departments, and potential adjustments to ensure efficiency. Her answer was thorough yet concise, demonstrating not just knowledge but thoughtful judgment. The executive's expression softened, and a few murmurs of approval spread around the room. Clara felt a flicker of satisfaction, but she stayed focused, knowing the meeting wasn't over. Halfway through, a technical issue with the projector threatened to disrupt the flow. While some would have panicked, Clara calmly retrieved her laptop, connected it to the backup system, and continued seamlessly. The room remained captivated, now impressed not only by her ideas but also by her composure under pressure. As the presentation concluded, Clara summarized the key points. "This approach allows us to work more collaboratively, reduce miscommunication, and streamline processes. I believe it is both practical and sustainable for long-term success." There was a moment of silence. Then one by one, colleagues nodded, murmured approval, and even began discussing ways to implement her ideas immediately. The shift in energy was palpable. Clara had not just presented a project. She had inspired belief, sparked collaboration, and earned the respect of everyone in the room. Ethan, who had watched quietly, allowed himself a small smile. He had seen her handle challenges before, but this was different. She had faced skepticism, technical problems, and pressure from high-ranking executives, and she had emerged composed, confident, and commanding respect without raising her voice. After the meeting, a few team members lingered, asking questions, clarifying details, and seeking her guidance. Clara answered each calmly, reinforcing her credibility and showing genuine care for others' understanding. She realized that leadership wasn't just about giving orders or being the loudest voice. It was about clarity, patience, and helping others feel confident in their roles. Later that afternoon, Clara retreated to the quiet lounge. She poured herself a cup of tea and sat down, reflecting on the day. Her heart still raced slightly, not from fear but from the intensity of the experience. She realized she had grown immensely, learning to handle pressure, navigate difficult personalities, and lead without demanding attention. Ethan appeared after a few minutes, leaning casually against the lounge doorway. "You handled that exceptionally well," he said. "I've been in meetings like that for years, and very few people walk out with everyone fully convinced and engaged." "You did it with ease," Clara smiled faintly. "Thank you. It wasn't easy, but I focused on the work and the people involved rather than the pressure." "That's what impressed me," Ethan said. "Most people get flustered under pressure or let the challenge intimidate them. You stayed calm and focused, and you gained respect because of it. That's rare." Clara felt a warm sense of pride. It wasn't about Ethan's praise. It was about knowing she had grown beyond the limitations she had once placed on herself. She had faced fear before at the piano, and now she had faced it in the professional world. Each act of courage built on the last. Over the next few days, the results of her presentation began to show. Teams were implementing her suggestions, workflows improved, and communication across departments became smoother. Colleagues approached her with questions and ideas, seeking collaboration rather than confrontation. She realized that leadership was contagious. Her calm confidence and thoughtful approach inspired others to do better, too. One afternoon, as Clara was reviewing progress reports, she received an unexpected message from Ethan. He asked her to meet him in the lounge. Her curiosity piqued. She made her way there, wondering what he wanted to discuss. When she arrived, Ethan was standing near the piano, the instrument that had first awakened her courage weeks ago. He gestured for her to sit. "I wanted to talk about your next step," he said. "You've proven yourself in ways I didn't expect. I think you're ready for something bigger." Clara listened intently. "What do you mean?" I want you to lead a cross-department initiative, Ethan explained. It will involve multiple teams, significant resources, and a high level of responsibility. Essentially, it's a project that could define the next phase of the company's operations. I believe you can handle it. Clara felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness. The opportunity was enormous, far beyond anything she had been asked to do before. She took a deep breath, recalling the piano, the first presentation, and the countless small victories she had achieved along the way. I'm ready, she said firmly. Ethan nodded, impressed by her composure. Good. This will be challenging, but I have confidence in your abilities. You've already shown courage, creativity, and leadership. Now it's time to take it to the next level. In the following weeks, Clara threw herself into the new initiative. She coordinated with team leaders, gathered data, created detailed plans, and navigated conflicts with patience and clarity. There were moments of doubt, occasions when deadlines seemed impossible and disagreements threatened progress, but she remembered the lessons from the piano. Face fear, focus on what you can control, and move forward step by step. Her colleagues began to notice the difference. She wasn't just a competent intern anymore. She was a leader, someone whose judgment was trusted, whose guidance was sought, and whose presence inspired confidence. Even those who had once doubted her now recognized her abilities and quietly admired her resilience. One evening, during a particularly intense session, an unexpected challenge arose. A critical team was falling behind and tensions flared. Voices were raised, frustration spilled over, and it seemed like the project might stall. Clara stepped in calmly. She listened to each concern, acknowledged the difficulties, and proposed a solution that was both practical and fair. Her calmness had an immediate effect. Team members who had been on the verge of conflict slowed down, reconsidered their approach, and followed her guidance. Within an hour, the situation was under control and the project was back on track. Ethan, observing from a distance, was quietly amazed. He had seen strong leaders before, but Clara's combination of calm authority, empathy, and intelligence was rare. He realized that she had grown far beyond anyone's expectations, including his own. By the end of the month, the initiative was progressing successfully. Teams were working together efficiently, obstacles were being addressed proactively, and results were beginning to show. Clara's leadership had transformed the project from a challenging task into a model of collaboration and success. One afternoon, Ethan called her into his office once again. Clara, he said, you've exceeded every expectation. Not only have you handled pressure, challenges, and skepticism, but you've also inspired others to do their best. I want you to lean. Weeks passed, and Clara's new initiative continued to gain momentum. Every day brought new challenges, but also new victories. She had learned to navigate complicated relationships, coordinate multiple teams, and remain calm under pressure. Her confidence grew steadily, yet she remained grounded, focused on the work rather than praise. The office had changed since that night at the piano. The energy was lighter, more collaborative. Colleagues who once overlooked her now sought her input. Managers who had been distant now included her in critical discussions. And Ethan, who had first seen her as a timid intern, now treated her as a capable leader. He still teased occasionally, but the jokes were lighter, mixed with genuine respect. One Monday morning, the office was buzzing with excitement. A company-wide meeting had been scheduled to review the progress of Clara's initiative. The conference room was packed. Executives, managers, and team leaders were all present, some with skeptical expressions, others curious to see how the project had advanced. Clara arrived early, as always, carrying her notes and laptop. She felt a familiar flutter of nerves, not fear but anticipation. The piano came to mind for a brief moment, and she smiled to herself. Courage, she realized, was something she carried with her no matter the setting. Ethan approached her quietly. Today is big, he said. Remember, it's not about impressing anyone. Just focus on the work and the results. You've done the preparation. Now let it speak for itself, Clara nodded. His words were reassuring, though unnecessary. She had prepared meticulously, and she trusted her abilities. The meeting began, and she presented her work with clarity, confidence, and a calm authority that held the attention of everyone in the room. As she spoke, she noticed the subtle changes in the audience. Some leaned forward, Others exchanged approving glances, and a few who had doubted her earlier seemed impressed by the depth and thoughtfulness of her ideas. She had anticipated questions, challenges, and objections, and addressed each with care and logic. Halfway through the presentation, one of the senior executives raised a complex question, challenging a key aspect of her proposal. Clara paused, collected her thoughts, and responded with a solution that was both practical and innovative. Her answer was precise yet empathetic, showing an understanding of the concerns while keeping the vision of the project intact. The room went quiet for a moment. Then murmurs of approval began, spreading like a ripple. Colleagues nodded, scribbled notes, and even the skeptical executives exchanged smiles. Clara's calm composure, combined with her clear reasoning, had transformed doubt into belief. Ethan watched from the side, quietly smiling. He had seen talented employees before, but few had the ability to inspire confidence and respect so effortlessly. Clara had grown far beyond what he or anyone else had expected. When the presentation ended, the room erupted in applause. But this time it wasn't polite or obligatory. It was genuine, a recognition of skill, courage, and leadership. Colleagues approached Clara, shaking her hand, congratulating her, and asking for advice. She accepted it gracefully, keeping her focus on the work, though inside she felt a deep sense of satisfaction. After the meeting, Ethan called Clara into his office. "You've exceeded expectations again," he said. "The way you handled questions, coordinated the teams, and presented your ideas, it's impressive. You've shown leadership, intelligence, and courage. But more than that, you've inspired confidence in others. That's rare." Clara felt a warm, quiet pride. She remembered the timid intern she had been weeks ago, hesitant and unsure, and contrasted it with the calm, capable leader she had become. "Thank you," she said softly. Ethan smiled, leaning back in his chair. "You've earned something more than recognition. I want to offer you a permanent leadership role. It's a position that allows you to manage projects, lead teams, and shape the company's future. It's not a joke like the piano challenge. This is real." Clara's heart skipped a beat. She had never imagined this. From a quiet intern, she had risen to a level of responsibility she had only dreamed about. She thought of her father, who had always believed in her, and of the courage that had begun at the piano. I'd be honored," she said. Ethan nodded. "Good. I knew you were capable from the start, but seeing it in action confirms it. You've proven something important, not just to me or the company, but to yourself. Leadership isn't about titles. It's about courage, consistency, and helping others succeed. You have all of that." Over the next few days, Clara's role officially changed. She was no longer just an intern or a temporary leader for a project. She was a recognized part of the company's leadership team. The change wasn't just on paper. It was visible in the way colleagues interacted with her, the respect she received, and the opportunities that now came her way. The office buzzed with excitement and curiosity. Some colleagues whispered about how a young intern had managed to rise so quickly. Others admired her determination and skill. Clara remained humble, focusing on her responsibilities, but inside she felt a quiet joy. She had taken risks, faced fear, and grown into the person she had always had the potential to be. One afternoon, Clara found herself in the lounge, standing by the piano. The instrument had been a silent witness to her transformation, from the timid intern to a confident leader. She brushed her fingers over the keys, recalling the first time she had played, the nerves, the courage, and the applause that had changed everything. Ethan appeared quietly behind her. "Do you remember this?" he asked, gesturing to the piano. Clara smiled. "How could I forget? That night changed everything." "It did," he agreed. "And I want you to know something. You didn't just impress with talent. You impressed with courage, composure, and integrity. That's what makes a true leader." Clara nodded, her fingers lingering on the keys. "I realized something important," she said softly. "Courage isn't about being fearless. It's about facing your fears and taking action anyway. That night I faced fear. Today I face challenges. And tomorrow, I'll face whatever comes next the same way." Ethan smiled, clearly impressed. "You've come a long way. I think the company, and everyone here, will benefit greatly from your leadership." In the following weeks, Clara's influence spread. She led new initiatives, mentored junior colleagues, and collaborated with managers to improve processes across departments. Her style was quiet but firm, patient yet decisive. People sought her advice not because she demanded it, but because they trusted her judgment and admired her ability to remain composed under pressure. The piano, once a simple instrument in the corner of the lounge, had become a symbol of courage and transformation. Clara often reflected on that night. She had started with a simple challenge, faced it, and allowed herself to be seen. That one act had created a chain of events that led to personal growth, professional recognition, and respect from everyone around her. One evening, after a long day of meetings and planning, Clara sat at the piano alone in the lounge. She pressed a few keys, letting the music flow. This time there was no challenge, no expectation, no audience, just the quiet, simple joy of doing something she loved. The notes filled the room, echoing softly against the walls, and she felt a deep sense of peace and accomplishment. Ethan, passing by, paused for a moment, listening. He didn't interrupt. He simply watched, recognizing that this was a private, meaningful moment for her. When she finished, she looked up and smiled. "It's been a long journey," she said softly. He nodded. "Yes, it has. And you've handled it beautifully. I think we're both surprised at how far you've come." Clara laughed quietly. "I never imagined any of this when I walked in as an intern. I just wanted to do my work well, and maybe play the piano one last time." Ethan chuckled. "Sometimes the smallest actions lead to the biggest outcomes." That night was the start of something remarkable. The office continued to thrive under Clara's leadership. Teams worked more efficiently, communication improved, and collaboration became the norm. She had not only transformed herself, but also influenced the environment around her, creating a culture of respect, trust, and courage. Looking back, Clara realized that the journey had been about more than career success. It had been about growth, self-discovery, and the courage to embrace her own abilities. From the timid intern who had quietly avoided attention, she had become a leader capable of inspiring others, handling challenges, and facing fear with confidence. Her story, once just a simple act at a piano, had become a journey of transformation that touched everyone around her. And as she sat there, fingers resting lightly on the keys, she knew that the future was full of possibilities. She had faced fear, embraced courage, and discovered a strength within herself that would guide her for years to come. Clara smiled, confident, calm, and ready. The journey had reached a remarkable milestone, but she knew it was only the beginning. The courage she had found, the respect she had earned, and the lessons she had learned would continue to shape her life and inspire everyone who witnessed her journey. And for Clara, that was the most meaningful success of all.